As a spiritual abuse survivor, I am certain that you have had to deal with being on the receiving end of the silent treatment at some point or another. And a lot of times, people who are receiving the silent treatment make certain mistakes that actually makes the situation a lot worse. And so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about three mistakes that you need to avoid when dealing with the silent treatment. My name is Dr. Felucia, and I'm a licensed psychologist and owner of Skillset Counseling, where one of the areas that I focus on is the recovery from and treatment of issues related to spiritual abuse. So, on to the topic at hand. What do you do when you receive the silent treatment? What are some of the mistakes that you need to watch out for? I'm going to specify that in this video, I'm going to be talking about silent treatment not only from individual people, but also from people who are spiritually abusive within a spiritually abusive system. So they're kind of like two systems of silent treatment that you probably have been exposed to. There may be one where it's a close relationship where it's just the two of you, or it might be an enclosed family system. And then the other place where you can experience it is within a spiritually abusive environment, either from a spiritually abusive leader or from people within that system. The good news is that the techniques that I'm going to talk about are relevant to both. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is you want to reassure yourself that you are safe. A lot of times, the silent treatment is weaponized um, by abusive and manipulative people. And being on the receiving end of it can be very emotionally dysregulating. And so, for a lot of people that have been on the receiving end of that, they feel unsafe. Silent treatment sometimes can be the proverbial calm before the storm. People have dealt with silent treatment for days or even weeks at a time. And it is something that I can guarantee you is a form of emotional abuse, right? So there's nothing to joke about with the silent treatment. Now, of course, there are going to be situations where maybe you may need to cease contact with somebody, but when people are using spiritual abuse, not spiritual abuse, sorry, silent treatment as a way to gain control over a situation, it's abusive. And so the first thing you want to remind yourself is that you are safe, right? You could have been in a situation as a child, or somebody who didn't have much defense or protection or advocacy, where you felt very unsafe on the receiving end of silent treatment. And so reminding yourself that you're safe. Well, how do you do that? One thing you can do is you can look at the differences between the silent, who you were when you received the silent treatment back then and who you are now. It can be something as simple as knowing, okay, I am older now. I have the ability to leave this environment if I don't want to be here anymore. So that is one way of reminding yourself that you're safe. Another way that you can do that is by doing some techniques that can help your body relax. I'm not going to go over all of them because we don't have, the time to do that, but something as simple as just deep breathing, taking a second to breathe in. And when you breathe in, you want to inflate your belly like a balloon. And then when you breathe out, you want to exhale through your nose and mouth. So doing something simple like that can help remind you that you are safe and that you do have agency and you do have autonomy and power. That's the first thing you want to do. The second thing that you want to do is that you want to look at this situation through the mind of somebody who is using the silent treatment or who is stonewalling you. When people do that, they are being, number one, emotionally immature, and number two, manipulative, right? An emotionally mature person will be able to say, hey, this is a problem that I'm having. Even if they need time, they might say something like, you know what, I just need a few hours to cool down, and then we can talk about this later, right? And so an emotionally mature person is going to express what they need and let you know kind of upfront what's going on. And also, they're not going to use that silence or that distance as a way to control, but rather regulate themselves. Remember, I've talked about this before, but when we use boundaries, we are not using boundaries as a way to control other people. It is to regulate and protect ourselves. And so when you're in this situation and you are being, the silent treatment is being used against you, think from that person's perspective. What are they trying to gain? And when I tell you to think from that perspective, I'm not telling you to do this as a way of like feeling sorry for them. It's a strategy, right? Because they're trying to do something. They either want to punish you or they want to control you. Or another option is that they are expecting sort of you to be the person to fix their emotions and fix their feelings. And so you have to remember that and you have to act accordingly, and you don't want to reward what they're doing. So let's say that they are trying to punish you for something. Maybe you disagreed with them about something, and instead of telling you that they didn't, they had an issue with that or whatever, they're giving you the silent treatment. Well, they're doing that because they want you to come crawling back and, maybe walking back what you said before. So you don't want to do that, right? You want to really dig in your heels and even stick harder to what you were disagreeing with them about before. Okay. Now, I say these things with a caveat, right? If you're in a situation where your physical safety or other safety is compromised, and you have to be careful in terms of how you use these techniques, right? So you have to use your own judgment. But in a situation where, this person is being, manipulative, trying to be controlling, you don't want to give in to what they are wanting you to give into. And I want you to dig your heels in even more. That can look a lot of different ways, right? I wouldn't suggest like bringing the situation up again and being like, well, actually, I just want to remind you that I disagree with you on that. I don't think that's necessary. But you want to dig in your heels with that, and you don't want to reward them for what they are doing to you. So a quick way to deal with this is just to leave the environment, right? If you are in a situation, for instance, where maybe you're like at a church or something, and you know that the people around you are ignoring you on purpose, leave, right? Get up, get your stuff, walk out of wherever it is, because what that is doing is you're showing those people that I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected like that. So leaving the environment could be one thing. If you are in a situation where you're like home with someone who's giving you the silent treatment, something else you could do is just leave that environment, right? You don't want them to see you being miserable about it and thinking, oh, what am I going to do so that they start talking to me again? If you can't leave, do something that makes you happy and fake it if you have to. If you have to listen to some music and sing along with it, if you have to do whatever it is to take your mind off of what you're doing, then do that. But don't be in their space, right? If they're going to be petty and childish, let them do that on their own. Don't be in that environment, and leave if you can. I would suggest leaving. If you can't, then don't be in that space. Be as far away from them as possible. Okay. And again, you want to make sure that you're not rewarding them for the silent treatment, because what ends up happening for some people is that you give in later. So, there's a silent treatment and then they're like, oh, I was upset about A, B, C, and D, and then you walk it back. Absolutely not. If when the situation does, get resolved and the person starts talking, then you can bring it up, but don't walk back what you said or did, unless you feel like you have to. And even if not feel like you have to, let's say there was something that you changed your mind on, do it, but don't change your mind about it. And I guess what's the word I'm looking for, like relent or whatever, in the context of that silent treatment argument. Okay, you want to keep things separate. um and then the last thing that I'm going to recommend is continuing the silent treatment. And that might seem kind of weird, but you don't want to be like chomping at the bit to get, to talk with them again. So let's say they, are not talking to you, and then all of a sudden they start talking to you and they want to pretend now that everything is okay and they haven't been ignoring you for the past week and a half. You don't play that game with them. You don't jump in and pretend that everything is okay. You can now, when I say continue the silent treatment, I'm not saying give them the silent treatment back. But what you could do is you can say, oh, I see that you're ready to talk now. I'm going to need some time, and I'll let you know when I'm ready to have our conversation. It's been, a week or whatever, and, I need some time. I'm not ready to talk now. And by doing that, you are taking back your power, and you are showing that their emotional manipulation doesn't dictate the timeline of how you guys are going to talk. Okay. So that is kind of in the context of like a one-on-one situation. If this is in an environment with maybe a spiritually abusive leader or a group of people, you can do the same thing. If they decide, maybe every week, you come into church and, they ignore you or something. And then this week they decide that they're going to start speaking to you. You don't have to play the game. And I'm not saying, basically what I'm saying is don't act in such a way where you are acting like you haven't seen the shenanigans that they've been pulling, right? So it may be something where you respond, but you respond in a very cold, professional way. You may decide to ignore them altogether, and that's you're within your right to do that. So, um, those are some techniques that I feel like will be helpful. Um, and also, I want you to think about what that person giving you the silent treatment, what it tells you about them, right? Because when people engage in that type of behavior, they're doing it for a very specific reason, and they want to get a particular reaction out of you. They want to get compliance from you. So it's very important that you are regulated enough on your end that you can manage your emotions, but also see things from their perspective in order to protect yourself. And that is a lot easier said than done. That is why, for a lot of these issues, things like therapy are important, self-care are important, because when you are regulated emotionally and you're feeling great physically, then you have the resources to address these sorts of things. If you are running on fumes and you're not getting enough sleep and you're continually exposed to these types of situations, it's going to be hard to put these things into practice. I'm going to review everything I said again. For those of you who've made it to the end, the first thing is you want to remind yourself that you are safe and that you do have agency. Excuse me. So whatever that looks like, whether it is, doing something to feel more present in your body, whether it is to take a mental survey of then versus now, make sure you do that. The second thing is don't reward this person's behavior. Look at things from their perspective. What are they trying to gain? What do they want? And don't give it to them, right? So whatever it is, don't give it to them. Don't give in. Leave if you can. If you can't leave, don't hang around them. You don't want to be feeding this toxicity that they have, that they get to see you suffer because they're not talking to you. And then the third thing is you want to continue that. You don't want to just jump back in when they want to talk. And so either, not speaking to them at that time, letting them know you want to talk to them at a later time and do that is great. And then the thing I also forgot that I wanted to mention is that when you do let them, when you do have this conversation later, one of the very first things you have to do is address that silent treatment, right? You can say, and whatever it is, you don't have to use the word silent treatment, but like, yeah, you haven't spoken to me in this many days, or I've noticed that when I walk by you guys in church that I say hi and you don't respond. I want you to call out that behavior for what it is. And you don't have to ask any questions. You just start out by pointing out what was done. And then you can go from there. So I hope these things are helpful for you. And I'd like to hear from you in the comments as well. How have you dealt with people who are giving you the silent treatment, or systems, or spiritually abusive leaders that use this against you? What kind of advice do you have? So I'd love to hear from you in the comments, and I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace. And one more thing, if you go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com, you can see a link where you can click for a free consultation. All right. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.